William, a taxi driver, was about to finish his shift when a young girl asked him for a ride to her mom's grave, late at night. He felt he had to help her, so he took her there, no questions asked. The ride was quiet, just the sound of the night, and the girl sitting quietly in the back. The next morning, William saw something on the news that made his heart stop. William jumped up from his chair and turned up the volume on the television. His hands started trembling, and he accidentally dropped the remote, which made a loud noise as it fell to the floor. William couldn't believe what the news presenter was saying, and suddenly he felt like he couldn't breathe. This was an absolute nightmare. His wife, Lara, walked into the room and noticed that he was upset. "Honey, are you all right?" she asked him, but William did not even notice that she had entered the room. He was staring at the TV screen with his mouth wide open. It showed a picture of the little girl that he had given a drive late last night. Something terrible had happened to that little girl, and William knew that if anyone found out he had brought her to the cemetery the night before, he could get into big trouble. He needed to take action, and he had no time to lose. But what did William see on the news? What had happened to the girl? And what was William planning on doing? William squinted as he saw a small figure standing by the road in the distance, raising its hand as if to call his taxi. He could barely even see this person in the dark shadows, and he had almost missed them. When he got close enough, he realized that it was a little girl, and this caught him by surprise, especially when he realized that she was alone. The girl got in the back seat and said, "To the cemetery, please." Other than that, she did not speak. William nodded and started his car, but he did not start driving yet. "If I may ask, where are your parents?" he asked. This was a safe neighborhood, but it was certainly strange that a little girl no more than 6 years old was wandering the streets alone at night. "I'm going to visit Mommy now. She died 2 years ago," the girl replied, and William's cheeks turned red. He apologized and silently scolded himself for being so nosy. However, he still didn't feel comfortable knowing this girl was outside alone at this time of night. He was just about to ask her if anyone was looking after her when she suddenly handed him some cash. "Please take me to see Mommy now," she said with a determined voice, and William finally started driving. This girl seemed to have made up his mind, and he did not want to sabotage her plans to visit her mother. But he had a plan. He would wait by the cemetery to give the girl a ride home again. That way, he could make sure she was safe. They were both silent the entire drive. When they arrived at the cemetery, William told the girl that he would be waiting for her at the exact same spot where he dropped her off to take her home. However, the girl replied that that wouldn't be necessary, and she walked away without saying another word. She didn't even wait for him to give her her change. William looked at the girl as she pulled open the cemetery gates, and he was surprised that they were not locked at this time of the night. He thought there was something very strange about this little girl. She had entered the cemetery with a determined step, and she did not seem frightened of the dark at all, which was quite unusual for a little child of her age. Once she had disappeared from his sight, William leaned back in his chair and listened to the radio. He glanced at the clock a couple of times, and he thought, "Well, she is certainly taking her time." Suddenly, he jumped up as he realized that 2 hours had already passed. He must have dozed off for a moment there. William jolted awake and snapped to attention, his heart racing as he realized the girl had been gone far too long. He wiped the sleep from his eyes and peered out the car's foggy windows. The street lamps cast spooky shadows all around the empty lot. Nobody else was around, just a creepy quiet that seemed to echo his worry. He let out a deep sigh. The air clouded the window even more. Feeling a strong sense of duty, William knew he couldn't just drive off without making sure the girl was okay. He grabbed his coat from the other seat, slinging it on as he stepped out into the chilly night. The gravel crunched under his boots as he made his way to the gates, his anxiety growing. At the cemetery gate, William flicked on his phone's flashlight. The beam flickered, throwing weird shadows onto the iron bars. He grabbed the gate. It was definitely locked. Weird, he thought, tugging again. It had swung open easily for the little girl earlier. It was like it was keeping him out, holding on to some secret. Since he couldn't get through the gate, William walked around the edge, shining his light over the old stones and tangled ivy. He wondered if someone had locked the gate after the girl went in. Was she still in there? A heavy feeling settled on him as he realized he might be the only one who knew she was there. He knew he had to do something. Stopping, William leaned against the wall, seeing his breath in the air. He felt stuck between wanting to rush in and not knowing what to do. "Where are you, kiddo?" he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Knowing he couldn't just leave without some answers, he decided his next move was to call for help. Pulling out his phone, he hoped he wasn't too late. William paced around the cemetery, his flashlight sweeping across the ground as he searched for another way inside. The fence stretched endlessly, old and imposing, and too tall to even think about climbing. Each gate he came across was locked tight, just like the first. Frustration knotted in his chest as he realized there wasn't any point in searching any further, yet the girl must still be in there. He stood back at the main entrance, his voice echoing slightly as he called into the quiet cemetery. "Hey, can you hear me? It's William." His calls seemed to hang in the chilly air, unanswered. He tried a few more times, his voice growing louder with each shout, hoping the girl might just be within earshot. The silence that followed each call was unsettling. William stood still, listening hard. The stillness was absolute. No rustling leaves, no distant footsteps. If the girl was there, surely she would have heard him and come out. But as minutes ticked by with no sign of her, a sinking feeling took hold. Realizing it was futile, William turned away from the gate with a heavy heart. The weight of unresolved worry pressed down on him as he trudged back to his car. He took one last look over his shoulder, half expecting to see the girl running toward him, but there was only the quiet cemetery and the cold night. William's mind raced with what-ifs and should-haves as he started his car's engine. He didn't know what else he could do. The drive home felt longer than usual, each mile stretching as he replayed the night's events over in his mind. He knew he'd be back at dawn, maybe with the police or anyone who'd listen. He had to leave tonight, though, the mystery unresolved and heavy on his soul as he kept worrying about the girl. As William drove through the quiet streets, his mind couldn't let go of the night's mysteries. Where did she go? Who locked the gate behind her? The questions played on a loop in his head. The road ahead blurred slightly as he tried to piece together the puzzle, feeling the eerie silence of the cemetery still lingering like a cold shadow. For a brief moment, the idea of going to the police flashed through his mind. But he hesitated, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "What would I even tell them?" he muttered to himself, the doubt creeping in. Could he really justify stirring up a fuss over a suspicion with nothing concrete to go on? "Maybe you're just tired, William," he told himself as he passed the familiar streetlights leading up to his neighborhood. "She's probably back home safe, tucked in bed." He tried to convince himself that there was a simple explanation, that his fatigue was clouding his judgment. It was easier to believe that than to think something worse. Pulling into his driveway, William killed the engine and sat for a moment in the darkness, the silence of the car wrapping around him. He carefully opened the door, making sure it didn't creak, and tiptoed into the house. As he slipped into bed beside Lara, his wife, he was careful not to disturb her peaceful sleep. The night's worries slowly drifting away. Exhaustion took over as soon as his head hit the pillow, and William fell into a deep sleep. The troubles of the night faded into the background, lost in the fog of weariness. When morning light crept through the curtains, the adventures at the cemetery seemed like distant, half-forgotten dreams, and the little girl was just a shadow in his mind. William shuffled into the kitchen, the morning light spilling across the floor. He put on some coffee and started scrambling eggs, his thoughts light and untroubled for the moment. He was blissfully unaware of the chaos that was about to unfold as he planned his day, humming softly to the tune of the radio playing in the background. As he flipped the eggs, William reached for the remote to turn on the TV for the morning news. The screen lit up, and suddenly, there she was, the little girl's face staring back at him from the screen. His spatula nearly slipped from his hand. "No, it can't be," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the news anchor's voice. He started channel surfing, his heart sinking with each press of the button. Every news channel echoed the same disturbing story. The little girl had gone missing. The familiarity of her image on the screen, the same determined look he had seen last night, made his stomach churn. It was like a bad dream he couldn't wake up from. The words "nationwide search" flashed across the screen along with a tip line number. William's face drained of color as he realized the gravity of the situation. He could very well be the last person to have seen her. The coffee mug trembled in his hand, the dark liquid sloshing dangerously close to the brim. "What have I gotten myself into?" he muttered under his breath. Just as he felt his knees might give way, Lara walked in. "William, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, concern etching her features. He glanced up at her, the room spinning slightly. "Lara, it's the girl from last night." "She's missing," he managed to say, his voice faltering as he braced himself on the kitchen counter for support. Suddenly, William snapped out of his trance. "I'm sorry, Lara. I need to check something," he said abruptly, his voice strained. He stood up so quickly that his chair clattered to the floor. Without waiting for a response, he grabbed his keys and was out the door, leaving Lara staring after him, bewildered and concerned. As the door slammed shut, Lara's brow furrowed in confusion. She turned back to the TV, her mind racing with thoughts of why William was so distressed by the news. "It's just terrible. What happened to that poor girl?" she muttered to herself, unaware of the depth of William's connection to the case. William's car sped towards the cemetery, his thoughts a whirlwind. The news hadn't mentioned anything about the cemetery, which meant neither the police nor the media knew the girl had been there. As he parked, his heart pounded with the urgency of finding any clue that might shed light on what had happened after he left her there. As he walked through the cemetery gates, the place was eerily quiet, with only a couple of visitors in the distance, tending to the graves of their loved ones. They paid him no mind as he moved quickly among the tombstones, looking for anything out of the ordinary. The weight of the pressure to find the girl was pressing down on him as he searched for signs of the girl. William retraced his steps from the previous night, his eyes scanning the ground as he walked to where he last saw the girl. The early morning light cast long shadows between the tombstones, making the cemetery seem even more secluded. "She has to have left some trace," he muttered under his breath, hoping for any sign that could lead him to her. He paused, realizing a significant hurdle. He didn't know the girl's name or her mother's. Without that information, he couldn't even begin to guess which grave she might have visited. He rubbed his temples, feeling the frustration mount. "How can I find someone when I don't even know who I'm looking for?" he whispered to himself. Despite his best efforts, William found nothing that directly pointed to the girl's visit. He walked each row methodically, looking for freshly disturbed soil or any new items that might indicate a recent visitor. But everything looked untouched, and no particular grave seemed to call out as the one she might have visited. As he wandered, William noticed the flowers and personal mementos left on various graves. He wondered if the girl might have left a similar token on her mother's grave. Each bouquet and trinket tugged at his heart, a silent testament to the loved ones remembered here. He hoped to find something, a toy, a note, anything that belonged to her. As he moved among the graves, his search felt increasingly invasive, but his resolve hardened when he spotted a child's drawing weighted down with a small rock on one grave. The drawing was simple but heartfelt, a brightly colored house with two figures holding hands under the sun. William's breath caught. This could be it, he thought, feeling a mix of relief and renewed urgency. The drawing clearly depicted a young girl and her mother, labeled Jessie and Mommy. William's heart skipped a beat. The news had mentioned the missing girl's name was Jessie. He looked around, the reality sinking in. He was standing at her mother's grave, right where Jessie had been before she vanished. "This is it," he whispered to himself. William held the drawing carefully, his eyes tracing the joyful faces and the birthday cake in the image. The mother was depicted with a birthday hat, and below the picture, in childlike handwriting, read, "Happy birthday, Mommy." Tears welled up in his eyes as he held the paper, the gravity of the moment overwhelming him. She was just here, celebrating, he murmured, his voice breaking. Clutching the drawing, William knew what he had to do next. Despite his dread of the unfolding situation, he understood the urgency. "Jessie needs to be found, and I might be able to help," he resolved. With a heavy heart, he headed back to his car, the decision to involve the police now clear in his mind. He needed to share what he had discovered. Once inside his car, William took out his phone and dialed the tip line number he had memorized from the morning's news. His hands shook slightly as he held the drawing on his lap, waiting for the call to connect. As soon as he heard the beep, signaling the line was ready, he cleared his throat, preparing to speak to whoever was on the other end. The phone barely rang once before a brisk and alert voice answered. "Tip line, how can I assist you?" came the inquiry. William took a deep breath, his grip tightening on the drawing. "Hello, my name is William. I believe I have some important information about Jessie, the missing girl," he started, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. He was ready to tell them everything he knew. William detailed everything to the operator: how Jessie had flagged down his taxi, her visit to the cemetery, and his discovery of the drawing earlier that morning. His voice was calm but urgent as he explained each step, ensuring he left nothing out. "I just found a drawing on her mother's grave that she might have left last night," he concluded, hoping it was the clue they needed. The operator's response was swift. "Thank you for this information, William. It's crucial that you go to the police station right away to give a full statement," she instructed. William nodded to himself. "I'll head there right now," he assured her, feeling the gravity of the situation pull him towards what he hoped would be helpful. After ending the call, William sat back in his seat, the silence of the car enveloping him. He was scared of being misunderstood, of being seen as a suspect. Yet he knew he had to follow through. "It's about finding Jessie," he reminded himself, steeling his nerves for the confrontation he imagined awaited him at the station. The drive to the police station was a blur. William's mind was occupied with thoughts of Jessie, piecing together the fragments of their brief encounter. wondering endlessly about what might have happened after he left her at the cemetery. The possibilities haunted him, each more troubling than the last, as he pulled into the parking lot of the station. As soon as William entered the police station, an officer who had been expecting him approached. "Mr. William?" he asked, a slight nod indicating he should follow. Without a word, William was ushered into an interrogation room. He prepared himself, knowing every detail he shared could be key to finding Jessie. Officer Daniels wasted no time, bombarding William with questions as soon as they sat down. "Tell me exactly how the girl entered your taxi and what was said during the ride," he demanded, his pen poised over his notebook. William recounted the events carefully, ensuring he missed no detail that could help them understand Jessie's actions that night. After hearing everything, Officer Daniels jotted down the final details. "Because you're the last person who saw Jessie, we need to ensure you're available for further questioning. You cannot leave the country until this is resolved," he stated firmly. William nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation and his role in the ongoing investigation. Officer Daniels then left for the cemetery, determined to gather more evidence. He spoke with the security team there, requesting immediate access to the surveillance footage from the night Jessie went missing. "We need to see everything from last night, especially around the time this taxi arrived," he instructed, pointing to the timestamp William had provided. The security footage was clear. It showed William's taxi pulling up and Jessie getting out alone. She walked towards her mother's grave, carefully placing the drawing on top. Officer Daniels watched intently as the footage confirmed William's story. "He's clear," he muttered to himself, relieved to see the visual proof of William's innocence. In the video, Jessie lingered by the grave after placing the drawing. She touched the headstone gently, then leaned forward and kissed it. After a moment, she turned and walked away, her figure slowly disappearing from the frame. The footage provided a poignant glimpse of her last confirmed moments, sparking new questions about where she went next. Although the officers had hesitated to involve Jessie's father in the search, fearing it might overwhelm him, Daniels thought differently. "Maybe he knows something we don't. Places she'd like to go," Daniels pondered. Deciding to take a chance, he called Stephen, who was shocked but immediately sprang into action, his mind racing with possibilities. Upon receiving the call, Stephen's heart thumped wildly. He grabbed his car keys and dashed to his vehicle. "I think I know where she might be," he muttered to himself as he started the engine. There was one special place not many knew about, a quiet retreat that held significant memories for his family. Stephen's car sped towards the old lake where he, Jessie, and his late wife had celebrated countless birthdays with quiet picnics. His grip tightened on the steering wheel as he neared the lake, the familiar route bringing a mix of nostalgia and urgency. He prayed he was right, that his instinct would lead him to Jessie. As Stephen approached the lake, his eyes immediately caught a small, familiar figure against a tree. There, Jessie was peacefully asleep, a blanket spread beside her with some food on it. Tears filled Stephen's eyes as he walked over quietly. "Jessie," he whispered, relief washing over him as he saw his daughter safe, surrounded by memories of happier times. Stephen's tears flowed freely as he gently shook Jessie awake. Her eyes fluttered open, confused at the sight of her father crying. "Daddy? Why are you sad?" she asked innocently. "I just came to celebrate Mommy's birthday," she explained, showing him the little decorations she had brought. Stephen hugged her tightly, overwhelmed with relief and love, grateful that she was safe. The news of Jessie's safe return spread quickly. Officer Daniels relayed the update through the police department, and soon, friends and community members were celebrating. "She's safe, she's okay," they shared in calls and messages, their relief palpable. The community's collective anxiety dissolved into joy, grateful for the happy resolution to what could have been a tragic story. William received heartfelt thanks from the police and Jesse's family. Your attentiveness and the details you provided were crucial. Officer Daniels commended him. Stephen expressed his gratitude personally, shaking William's hand firmly. "Thank you for everything you did last night. You helped bring her back to us," Stephen said, his voice thick with emotion. Over time, William became more than just a taxi driver to Jesse and Stephen. He became a trusted friend. Each year on the anniversary of Jesse's mother's birthday, he would drive them to the cemetery and back, sharing in their tradition of remembrance. This annual ritual deepened their bond, turning a day of sorrow into one of shared memories and enduring friendship. As the years passed, the memory of that tense night faded but never completely disappeared. It served as a reminder of the community's strength and the unexpected friendships that can arise from adversity. William, Jesse, and Stephen found comfort in their annual tradition, each visit to the cemetery a testament to love and resilience. It was, indeed, a happy ending for everyone involved.